Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Todd Banner. About a little more than 4 months ago, I bought a Lumix ZS100, a used model. It was user refurbished, and did a video back a few weeks after I bought it. But given that I've been using it quite extensively, I thought I'd do a follow-up. I'm very happy with the results that I've been getting out of this camera. Now, it's not perfect. No camera is. I was a little concerned because some of the early reviews said that this camera had lens softness issues. I took a lot of photos with it and didn't immediately see any issues, but as I've gone along, I can say that wide open at the wider angles, there's some corner softness. At 25 millimeters, which is the widest it goes, that's 25 millimeter equivalent. The softest corner, there's one corner that's softer than the rest, and it's the lower right-hand corner. What's interesting is that when you zoom in, that softness kind of shifts over to the other corner, on the opposite side. But stopping down, a stop helps a lot. So at 25 millimeter equivalent, this is f2.8 maximum aperture. If you stop down to f4, it gets visibly better. And if you stop down to f5.6, which is 2 stops down from maximum aperture, it's sharp across the frame. Now, of course, being a variable aperture zoom, as you zoom in, f5.6 gets closer and closer to being the maximum aperture. As a matter of fact, somewhere between around 100 and 135 millimeter equivalent, I think the maximum aperture goes to f5.9. I mean, the maximum aperture at 250 millimeters is f5.9. So there's not a lot of room there to work with, especially since the lens only stops down to f8. So at maximum aperture, you have less than a stop that you can actually stop down with. Not sure why the design decision was made to do that. The Sony RX100 models, which have the same size sensor, go to 11. So why Panasonic chose to limit this to f8, I don't know. Luckily, at the telephoto end, it's pretty sharp across the frame anyway. At f5.9, it's not bad. It's a little bit softer than it is in the other wider ranges, but it's still usable. And the corner softness issue is not as big a deal. So I've been pretty happy with that. Now, the way I've been using this is just setting it to aperture priority and keeping that at f5.6 unless I need to go wider. And really, if I need to go wider, I don't even bother with doing that manually. I just click the mode dial over to program and the camera does it. So that's easy enough. Also, I usually have this set to record RAW and JPEG files. And what I've been finding is that the JPEGs are generally good enough, that there really is no need for the RAW files. Now, what I do is I use the natural photo style, which is a relatively flat, low contrast photo style. And actually, I've gone into the menu and decreased the contrast 2 notches below the default. And also, I have the noise reduction set to the minimum, because any noise that comes through you can deal with in Lightroom. I've also been using this camera for stock photography. As subscribers to the channel know, I am an Alamy contributor, and Alamy has a quality control system that really only looks at technical aspects of the photo, not really content. So if you've got too much noise or it's not exposed correctly, it'll get rejected. I have not had an image rejected for any reason by Alamy with this camera. I had 2 images, because I also contribute through Wirestock to other agencies. So I had 2 images that Wirestock rejected, and it was due to noise. And when I looked at them, the noise was not that bad and easily fixable in Lightroom. So I did that, and resubmitted, and they've been accepted. Then shooting the natural profile with the low contrast, you can tweak a JPEG a fair amount before you run into trouble. Not nearly as much as you can a RAW file, but I tend not to do a whole lot of changes to my images. So natural profile JPEG is just fine. Now, last week, I had some business down in the Wicker Park neighborhood of Chicago, which I just go up to North Avenue, a main east-west artery, and it's a 20-minute trip into the city to that neighborhood. And if you know Chicago, you know that that's kind of a hip and trendy area. So after I was done with the business I was attending to, I took a walk along Milwaukee Avenue and did urban photography. I call it urban photography because it's not always street photography. One of the reasons I like this camera is you can go from shooting at 35 to 50 millimeters and shooting traditional street photography, and then if you see something that is either not possible to get close to, or something's happening and you don't have time to get close to it before it's not happening anymore, you can zoom quite a bit. So came away with a bunch of images, all of them JPEGs. And I've got a little slideshow. So I'm going to run that right now for you to see, and I'll be back with a follow-up. So that is Wicker Park. Milwaukee Avenue actually is the street that I was on. Milwaukee Avenue is one of the diagonal streets in Chicago, so it runs up from downtown Chicago to the northwest. Interestingly, Chicago streets are based on a grid, but we have a lot of diagonal streets that run out from downtown. And what's interesting about those streets is they follow old Native American trails. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Please, if you have any comments or questions, leave them below. If you have this camera, the ZS100 or TZ100 in other parts of the world, and want to comment with what you've been finding with it, do so. If you have its little brother, the ZS200, TZ200, might be cool to hear from you folks as well. If you like this, found it inspirational, helpful, please pop that like button. That's a big help to me. If this was interesting enough that you subscribe, that's great. I really appreciate that. I'm Todd Banner, and I will see you next time.